The Real Talk is back and better than ever. Welcome to Real Talk, and I am your host, this intellectual Kate Taylor. And this is HTLA Radio 1 New York. If you love film, if you live film, then this is the film show for you. Tonight, we're going where it all begins, and we're going to talk genres. Oh, not only will we talk genres, but we're going to analyze where the best of these genres originate. Who does it best and who doesn't. These next weeks will see us getting into just how and why this show strives to be necessary for the ability to analyze film, as well as to keep much more in mind while watching your next films, whether a filmmaker or a connoisseur. This is a film analysis show. This show is for those with an interest in not just seeing film, but being part of the history of making them. Film is about creating life and telling the stories of those creations. Worlds, characters, loves, losses. I am a screenwriter, married to a director, and we tell stories. Thus, I dissect and analyze the stories others tell, so I can constantly discover and learn and find better ways to tell my stories to you. So again, if you watch film, more than watch film, if you, like me, become the film you're watching for that 90 or so minutes, then again, welcome to Real Talk. Before we get into tonight's show, I've got to take care of those generous and brilliant folks that keep me on the air for you. So, tonight's episode of Real Talk is brought to you by Netflix. It just might bring everyone together. Procast, the automated intelligent project facilitation solution. It's coming. And Orville Redenbacher's Gourmet Naturals. Gourmet flavor, none of the guilt. Please keep in mind that the opinions I'm about to express here in my show do not necessarily reflect those of HTLA Radio 1 or our sponsors and advertisers. God forbid, because sometimes they're pretty out there. Okay, so for all my past, current, and future episode information, as well as forums in which to discuss what you think about my celluloid dissection, visit us on www.htlaradio1.com. Now, that's the number 1, just like us. Also, voice command, don't type, over to http://atlanticfilmgear.proboards.com. From big names in the industry to indie frontrunners and those just starting out, there are resources and invaluable discussions on every possible aspect of filmmaking, from script to screen to casting to craft service. Network, contribute, and grow, and do some real talking of your own. Now, on with the show. So I'd like to take a couple episodes and talk about some filmmaking basics. Now, as a screenwriter, my work consists of different components than that of a director or DP or, well, anyone else involved in the process, really. What I do gets the ball rolling, so to speak. It's the imaginings of the screenwriter that kick off every single project ever made. So tonight I want to talk about genre. Over the last decade or so, Hollywood has seen a surge in the latest twisting trend to hit my area of work, the genre mashup. Now, just about every script I pick up is a combination of 2 or more genres. As a primarily horror and thriller writer, I've paid particular attention to the changing face of these genres within the industry, both film and television. Now, The Walking Dead made the zombie genre more mainstream than ever, commercial even. But even before that, films like Shaun of the Dead and Boy Eats Girl have given birth to the genres such as the zomcom and now the ever-popular rom-zomcom. I mean, that's just a little bit of a mashup there. So the bottom line is that with each passing award season, the genre mashup is being taken to a whole new level. And pretty much anything is possible, and there's nothing that's out of the realm of the taboo. Just recently, some of my most favorite unexpected genre mashups were Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Now, this was a total sleeper, took us completely by surprise, and if you haven't seen it, by all means do. And not the Abraham Lincoln Zombie Hunter. Don't get them confused. One is an indie that just tried but failed miserably to capture attention completely. But Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was so brilliantly made. It starred Rufus Sewell, and there were a couple other famous actors, but the guy who played Abraham Lincoln, I can't remember his name right now. But this was a complete and total sleeper hit. It was a historical, piece about, right before he gave, the Emancipation Proclamation. It was that part of the Civil War and all that kind of stuff. And yet there was this whole subplot of how he really was a vampire hunter and how that came about. And successful beyond belief. Not missed a beat that entire film. It was just brilliant. It could have been an action adventure, epic, historic, vampire film. It was just an uber mashup. So it really, really worked. So personally, I can really sink my teeth into writing just about any genre except comedy or romance. Now, I've written a few sitcom pilots in the past to warm review, but it's torturous to try to be funny if you're just not that kind of funny in real life. I've got more of an intellectual, sarcastic, kind of dry wit, so I've been told. So that really doesn't, it's more difficult to translate that into dialogue than, your average kind of comedy, which is, some slapstick kind of thing or sitcom, visual kind of pratfall thing, which I just, I leave that to better than I, because that's just not my suit, And romance, again, not my strong suit, because just as in my preferred genre writings, drama and thrills and scares are rife throughout my love life, too. So the caution to write what you know couldn't be truer in my case. Now, I know that when I read a truly funny script or watch a real tearjerker of a romance, like we saw with The Notebook some years back, I truly do bow in admiration for those talented enough to craft those worlds, because it just escapes me. It's just not within my purview. So the art and craft of filmmaking, I don't believe in the jack of all trades and master of none mentality. While I, as so many of us do in this industry, wear more than one hat, I'm certainly not possessed of enough hubris or talent to veer from my practice genres. So I'm even more in awe when mashups just work that you never expect. So in the ever more mashed up world of genres and the never-ending quest for the never been seen before, let's ask, what are the defined genres as we know them to have always been then? So, and I'm also going to light my cigarette, because as you know, here at HTLA Radio 1, we are proponents of the smoking community. So yes, there's no rules here. We don't do the PC thing and don't smoke. So now, courtesy of AMC's film site, I've gotten all my genre information from them. So right now we're going to talk about genres. So how did they begin? Film genres are basically various classifications. They have familiar or instantly recognizable conventions, and like we were just talking about, many films kind of straddle several genres, and they're called hybrids. So the history of genres is, by the silent era end, many of the main genres were established. The melodrama, the western, the horror film, comedies, action-adventure films really started to get going, the swashbucklers and the war movies. Musicals were inaugurated with the era of the talkies. And the genre of the science fiction films, that was slowly starting to come about, but it wasn't really popularized until the 50s. Now, one problem with the genre films is that they can become stale, cliche-ridden, and over-imitated. So the traditional genre that's been reinterpreted, challenged, or subjected to scrutiny may be termed a revisionist. And I think that's where the whole thing got started. And all these revisionist films then just wound up, started to get, people wanted mashups. They wanted something different than they'd ever seen before. So, hence Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and things like that. And, with the advent of CGI, and there's nothing that we can't put on the screen nowadays, there's really no limit to what we can do. And, I'm always looking for that new mashup, So what are some of the main film genres as we know them to be? Action films, right? And adventure films, right? Comedy films, crime and gangster films, drama films, of course. Now, epics and historical films, these are some of my favorites. Although they are quite tedious to write. They're really my favorites, though. Horror films, of course, that's my staple. Musical and or dance films. Science fiction films, that's hubby likes those. and war and anti-war films, believe it or not, and westerns. So those are some of the main ones. Now we have some subgenres of these, and we've got biographical films, or biopics as they're called. We've got the so-called chick flicks, and we've got detective and mystery films. Something else I do enjoy writing. I'd like to get more into that too. And a more popular genre than ever, disaster films. Here's another great mashup. My husband and I saw this on our anniversary a couple years ago when it first came out. Eli Roth, he's one of my all-time favorite writer-directors ever. And he did a film where they go on vacation to this little island, and all these disasters hit. This is a mashup of every disaster movie plus a whole bunch of other stuff. There's romance in there. There's action. There's thrills. There's gangs chasing them through the streets. There's, and all these things. I don't want to spoil the end for you, but if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. It's really good. And, well, you probably get it on Netflix now. And it was just another one of those mashups, and he does them so well, and it compiled, it had everything in it, and it was really, really good. And even character arcs, that's another good thing. He writes his characters really well. We care about them. We're interested. We want to know what happens to them. And he also had a role in the film, which I think he's a great actor, too. So there you go. But just another example. And disaster films have, risen through the ranks now, I guess, because we have so many bad things that are going on in the world that when we see something that's even more disastrous than what we're facing in our own life, it makes us feel better. So some more of the subgenres include fantasy films, Lord of the Rings and all that. Film noir, they're making a comeback. There's been a couple done. Guy films as opposed to chick flicks. Now, what we call melodramas or weeper films, kind of a subgenre of the chick flick subgenre, I guess. Road films, the road trip films, they're cool. And romance films, just your basic romance films. Sports films, where we see the team go to victory. Supernatural films, another subgenre of horror, right? Now, thriller suspense films, okay, they're a whole nother genre on their own. And then we can even go a little bit further into other major film categories, above those subgenres, such as animated films and anything that we consider foreign, British films, anything that comes out of the UK, that's another major category now, right? So children's, kids, family-oriented films, that's another category. And now classic films. So anything before a certain era, like before the 70s, I think, is now being deemed, part of that classic era. Cult films, things that normally, like the Human Centipede. Now there's 2 of them, I believe. I don't know if a third one's coming out, but, major cult following for those films. Documentary films. I love them, love them, love them. And serial films. These are films that are in more than one part. And I'm starting to get a little upset because with all the advent of the adaptations from these great books that are coming out, we're seeing a lot of what could really be done in one film or maybe 2, maximum. But I'd prefer a long film. I don't have an issue sitting in the theater for 3 hours to see the whole thing and not have to wait 2 years for another film. We've seen it with Lord of the Rings. We've seen it with Twilight, with that whole series. And there's a whole bunch that I've heard are going to be, the Shades of Grey. There's going to be 3 of them. Really? Okay. Not that I'm not into that sort of thing, because I am, but 3 of them, I don't need to see 3 of them. You can tell me the whole story. That's what we do. We condense. We make it work, right? So, and speaking of the 50 Shades of Grey film, another major film category that's come about is the sexual/erotic film. That's another category. And then, believe it or not, we've got the silent films, because there was, I can't remember the name of it now, some kind of Hollywood Babylon-ish kind of film, and it had all the major stars of the day, and it was only a few years ago. And I know it was completely in black and white, and it was filmed in that kind of way. Whether it was silent or not, I'm not sure. But that would be an interesting kind of thing, to bring about. I consider that part of the experimental kind of film, where it's just visual and there's no actual dialogue. But, so, there you go. There's contrasting types of films, right? We've got your non-fictional, and those are the documentaries or the biopics. They're also called reality films, and some of them are derived from reality TV. I'm not looking forward to Honey Boo Boo the movie, but, it could happen. Right, we've seen it happen. And contrasting with the fictional film, which is the narrative, right? And then we have docufiction or docudramas, right? Part fiction, part documentary or semi-documentaries, lots of license being taken, and let's not forget the mockumentaries, those kind of things. Now, we also have feature-length films versus short or short subject films. We have anthology films, which I happen to love. I'm a huge fan, especially of horror anthologies. I'm actually writing one right now called The Colors of Fear. So that's something that I'm looking forward to finishing because I've always been a fan of that sort of thing. And Stephen King I have to thank for that. And in this category also falls the serials, right? So contrasting audio types, we have the silence versus the talkies, but that's more historic. We don't have to worry about that now, thank goodness. And now we have the contrasting types of quality and funding, right? You have A, which is first-run pictures, mainstream, big budget, Hollywood, sometimes blockbusters, but professionally made film. And then you have the B. They're lower. They're called B movies, sometimes even Z movies. And, the independents and the indies have fallen into this category. And, coming out in the future, you might just see a push towards more quality for these independents. We're going to see what we can do about that. But also in this category is avant-garde or experimental underground films. Those are usually very low budget, right? Art house films, my husband would call those the beret-wearing films. Amateur films or guerrilla-style filmmaking falls into this category as well, right? We've got regular 2D visual presentation versus 3D. Black and white or monochrome versus color. You've got widescreen versus pan and scan formats. You've got animated films, which also include hand-drawn, CGI, et cetera, or those are versus live-action or unanimated films, okay? We've got domestic versus foreign language films. They can either be subtitled or dubbed. Original version versus prequels, sequels, re-releases, and remakes. There's just so many. And, of course, you have the rated versus the unrated films. And now there's a film purpose category. So you have message films. Now, these are usually really serious, right? And they're also called propagandistic films. And these are versus, they're purely for entertainment pictures, right? So this is what we've got. And there's so many different areas of genre and things that have gone into this. So it's pretty much limitless what we can do. And so this is where we're at, and we're seeing that, we've come a really long way in the film industry since it began, since its inception. So there's only 7 stories, so there's only certain things that you can do so many times over and over. And this is what leads us into, the genre mashup. And it's an exciting thing, and I'm always interested in seeing what's next to come out. I'm trying to think of some more really interesting mashups. Quentin Tarantino is good at this. He tries to, he does the retro kind of thing. He does the throwback. He puts in the, with the Asian flair from the Kung Fu movies he watched when he was a kid. But then he puts the modern sensibilities in there and, the crime of today and the issues that we face today and things like that. Oh, by the way, I just found out that they made Dusk to Dawn into a series. So the first season's on Netflix, and I'm sure going to catch it this weekend, too. But let's take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we got lots more on this topic, so stay with us.
When you have cable and can't record all your shows, you feel unhappy. When you feel unhappy, you go to happy hour. When you go to happy hour, you're up for anything. When you're up for anything, you head to a Turkish bathhouse. When you head to a Turkish bathhouse, you meet Charlie Sheen. And when you meet Charlie Sheen, you reenact scenes from Platoon with Charlie Sheen. Don't reenact scenes from Platoon with Charlie Sheen. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV.
There are machines that can do things for us. Machines that can make things for us. Machines that can see right through us. And machines that want to be us. Want to replace us. But they are not us. There is one machine that makes us greater. A machine so instinctive, so seductive, it's as alive as we are. It doesn't click or buzz. It roars. Jaguar.
I always said shoes are like women. They inspire beautiful music.
But what about these?
Stilettos sound like this.
What does my fragrance inspire?
That's got soul.
Mai Tais are beautiful. They don't need music.
Bringing the stars together. That's the magic of Macy's.
HTLA Radio 1.
Okay, we're back, and you are listening to Real Talk with Kate Taylor on HTLA Radio 1 New York. Now, tonight, we are getting back to basics, and we're talking about, screenwriting and genre and film type, et cetera, et cetera. And there's just so much to talk about in this type of category. While there might only be 7 stories, there's an infinite kind of combination of ways that we can actually write stories and tell stories and pull subplot and throw these things together to make something completely new. It's been done a few times in the recent past. Most recently with the zombie and rom-com and rom-zom-com and all that kind of stuff. And, that kind of genre going more mainstream and commercial than ever before. So that opens the door to, other mashups of that kind in those genres for the horror film or the supernatural film or things of that nature. So, anything is possible. If we can open the door to that kind of plausibility in those areas, then anything's possible. So, and this is why I love what I do, and I love being a screenwriter, and I love telling stories and seeing them come to life, and, know that these worlds are worlds that could be possible because I'm looking at them. So that's what makes it really fun for me. We'll get into character in another show, but that's another reason I love to do what I do, too. But now, as I often do in this show, as I always do in this show, I always compare the Hollywood machine and sometimes some indies domestically with films from other industries around the world. As much as I love this country and I love, our industry, the U.S. has made every genre of film there is, but as it holds true with the jack-of-all-trades comment earlier in the show, when it comes to types of film, we're not always the best at a particular genre. And I believe that this quote was made especially for our industry and this topic tonight. So what countries spit out the best films in a genre type? Now, understand that the following is my opinion, based on a decade of scrutinizing various films from every country that makes film and comparing them to like films put out by the U.S., okay? So, let's start with my genre, horror. Now, when it comes to horror films, right, pretty much worldwide, I don't think I've ever seen a country make a bad horror film. At least not as, we have our good horror and our bad horror in every industry, right? So, but as far as the subtypes of horror, when it comes to ghost stories, now, my opinion completely is that there's a tie between Japan and Korea for this genre. They're masters at it. Their culture lives this as a reality, and so they're never for a loss of stories. And the pacing and the crafting and, they can tell the same story over and over again, but the different aspects make them watchable. So much so that you'll find a great many of these now being remade in U.S. So, that's a testament to just how good they are. Let's not go The Grudge, The Ring. Like, there's just too many to list. Dark Water, starring Jennifer Connelly. These all kicked it off way back when, and now it's just, a free-for-all of remaking Asian horror films. So... Now, we're going to talk about monster movies. This was kind of a tough one. I'm going to say that the U.S. kind of has a corner on the market of monster horror movies, but there is a couple of foreign monster films that are comedies that I really think you should take a look at. Ireland came out with a monster film called The Grabbers. And I just watched this some months ago. And what a slick premise. And talking about tapping into the stereotype. there's a monster, and what protects the townspeople is, their blood alcohol level. In Ireland, the monster can't stand alcohol, so it's like kryptonite to him. So the more drunk the people in the town get, the safer they are from the monster. So this film is called The Grabbers, and it's from Ireland, and it's well made, and it's witty, and the dialogue is good, and the pacing is snappy, and I definitely recommend seeing it. Korea, also, a film called The Host, and it's another monster movie. It comes out of the sea and it wreaks havoc on the town. But what I loved most about The Host was there was a great story about the main characters. They really kind of cared about each other and pulled through, and family took care of family, and it was really good. So you want to go check out The Host, and you want to check out The Grabbers, both available on Netflix. Okay, definitely do that. But as far as overall, I think the U.S. has a corner on the monster film market. Okay. Now, vampire/werewolf films. I got to say USA, again, has the cap on the market here because while I've seen some, we really, really kind of do it well. There was a Spanish film, I can't remember the title now, where the boy moves to a new town and it turns out he's a werewolf. And that one was really well made. But I think we still have a cap on those kind of things. And that goes true with the zombie films, too. I've not seen another industry put out zombie films as well as we do and as consistently as we do. From Romero to... Now, let's make an exception for Italy. Dario Argento, while he pioneered the zombie as demon, he's done several films, Demons and Demons 2, and a film called, what is it called now? Oh, it's escaping me now. But he's used the demon possession to make zombie, whereas George Romero actually did like the virus or the meteor from space or whatever his reasoning for, government experimentation for, the mutation of the human to zombie. But we can't overlook Italy and Dario Argento's contribution to that. Although he went the demon route, it's a supernatural, more religious kind of possession thing. That's the cause of his zombies. Now, slasher/serial killer films. All right, this might come as quite a surprise to you, but the U.S. does not own this genre. I have to give it to all of Europe. If you've and even Australia, too. If you've seen Wolf Creek 1 and 2. 2 just came out, actually. It's on Netflix as well. Wolf Creek 1 isn't, but, maybe you can get it somewhere. But Wolf Creek 2 did just come out. Based on a true story, too. And, France is really good at the serial killer film. Just about all of Europe. I mean, Italy's done some great stuff. Oh, and that reminds me, if you haven't seen Troll Hunter, back to the monster category, the comedy monster category, there was another one. It's just, I hadn't notated it earlier, but it's a film out of, I think, Norway called The Troll Hunter. And you have to see that because that's really great. And the way it's made is really believable, too. You're not quite sure if it's real or not until you get to the end. So make sure you watch that as well. All right, but back to slasher/serial killer films. Europe definitely, they're not afraid to put it out there. And there's things that, I've actually reviewed some films on this show previously. I had one film about a father's revenge. He sought out the killer of his child and did these terrible things to him, etc. And that was pretty graphic, and that was pretty great. They have a different take on the sensibility of it than we do. So you just really need to experience that and then judge for yourself, right? Okay. So as far as the horror genre, that's pretty much where I'm at with all that stuff. Now I want to move on to the thriller genre because that's my second favorite genre to write. Now, cop thrillers. Again, Korea takes it. Korea takes it by the way they portray their police force. They're not afraid to show them flawed. They're not afraid to show them, not doing the right thing. But it's always in the pursuit of justice. And, their corruption always is a means to an end rather than just for corruption's sake itself, like you'll find with a lot of the Japanese cop films. So a lot of the Japanese cop films, it's more like America. If the cop's dirty, it's because he's working with the mob or the Yakuza in this case. But, in Korea, the cops, if they do something dirty, it's always to catch the bad guy. It's always as a means to the end of ultimate justice. So that's what makes it really, really good. Now, that's for film, because I don't watch a lot of Korean TV. But Scandinavian television really has a lock on the market of the cop thriller. They've made several translated into English. The most recent was, if you've seen the television show The Killing, and that was based in Seattle, but that was actually a remake of I believe a Danish TV series. Yeah. For Bridalson was the Danish name of the TV series. Can you believe I remembered that? Venus Sud was the writer/director of that. Wow, I'm pretty good. I remembered that. So, yeah. So, Scandinavia is really, really good. And that's not the first one. There's so many. Where the UK is noted for its detective mysteries and stuff. Well, Scandinavia is noted for its cop thrillers. So, for television, you really need to pick up a few and pay attention to those. If nothing else, if you're in this industry, you're going to benefit from learning different styles, different ways of pacing, different styles of writing, different ways to portray characters. There's just, you cannot just subject yourself to the Hollywood formula and call that it. You really need to get out there and research other styles and things like that, because it can only help you. You'll find the one that really resonates with you, and then you'll find that your work is elevated to a level you hadn't expected, right? Okay. Now, courtroom dramas, I got to give it to the U.S. Absolutely have to. Now, as well as political thrillers, because obviously our government is a one-of-a-kind kind of government, right? So we pretty much have a lock on the political thriller as we know it. The UK runs a close second, but their portrayal of Parliament and all that kind of stuff. But the addition of a monarchy there kind of throws a monkey wrench into the works and things like that. So, but it's also, again, a tie between Scandinavia and the U.S., because Scandinavia has also done many, many political thrillers. They have a quite unique political system there. And, in those countries, while they're monarchist for the most part, you've got The Hague, you've got a lot of different entities over there. I believe Interpol is headquartered there too. And there's just a lot of different facets and organizations there that make the Scandinavians really interesting to see and throw a different, light on things of that nature. Erotic thrillers. Yeah, we totally are so bottom of the barrel when it comes to erotic thriller. It's not even funny. France takes that one hand over fist. The Swimming Pool with Charlotte Rampling. That's just, one of them. And, oh my gosh, I could go on and on. Anything that Isabelle Hubert's in, oh my gosh, there's just so many. But France takes it hand over fist when it comes to the erotic thriller. Just unequivocal. Now, family thriller. These are what I consider like, Winter's Bone. Gosh, there was that movie a long time ago with Sean Penn and Chris Walken, like Father, Like Son. That's a family thriller. That's what I consider a family thriller. And that was brilliant, by the way. And if you hadn't seen it, definitely see that, because that's just a brilliant film. Yeah, so we're going to take that. The U.S. is going to take the family thriller. But again, it's a tie. France and Italy, because I've seen several Italian films that do that family dynamic kind of betrayal thing really, really well also. So don't be afraid to watch any kind of European family thriller in that way too, because you probably won't be disappointed. Oh, and here's another one of my favorite subgenres of the thriller genre, the revenge film. And I've actually done maybe 2 shows on this show already about the revenge film, because it's one of my favorites. But it's a tie between Korea, Japan, and China for this one. They do it really well. There's a trilogy of Chinese films: Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, Old Boy, and which that was just remade with Josh Brolin, actually, and that's available on Netflix, and I haven't quite seen it yet, but it's on my list to watch because I've seen the original Old Boy, and I want to see if that kind of measures up. But it doesn't, it doesn't. The thing about the U.S. remaking Asian film is the Asians are not linear like we are. We're very linear, beginning, middle, end, and the Asians tend to jump around a lot, but it all makes sense in the end. It's always wrapped up in the end and tied up, and you know what happened, and you leave, the film saying, oh, okay, I get it, which is very cool because it could ruin the experience otherwise. So that's what makes them brilliant to me, and their pacing is better. It's different in that way. You can get bored just waiting for what is going to happen. And because the Asians tend to change it up and change the pacing a little bit, you don't find that with those. But, you won't find a better place to watch a revenge thriller than anywhere in Asia, I do include Thailand. I do include, some of the lesser known industries in that, but they're rare, but just, peruse around and browse around. You can definitely find some of these on Netflix. That's another reason I love Netflix so much, is they have a nice, significant foreign film selection. So definitely check that out. Last but not least in the thriller category is mystery. All right. And of course, this goes without saying that the UK takes it. The Britons have done detective and mystery and all that kind of stuff since eons, beginning of time kind of thing. So we'll never catch up with that. We just remake their stuff. That's all we do. Let's face it. If you say anything different, you're not being honest, and that's just the way it is. Oh, my goodness. Now, onto the comedy genre. Well. I can't really speak to this very much. I have seen some really hilarious French romantic comedies, a couple really good Italian romantic comedies. But I guess I'm going to have to give it to the U.S. because they're the predominance of what I've seen in the little rom-coms that I've seen. That's where it was. Now, as far as comedy hijinks go, obviously we've got it hand over fist, with our pratfalls and our things, and we're we have so many brilliant comedians here in this country. But don't overlook France either. I mean, Clouseau came from there. Don't even, you can't overlook them for that either. So, and Benny Hill in the UK, there's so many in Europe that you have to give it a shot. Don't ever be prudish and say, well, go Team US. You have to try other things and expand your horizons. That kind of thing. I'm not quite sure if I have enough time before commercial break, though, to get to the rest. Okay, let me just try and do... Well, now here's a good category. This is perfect for before the break. The fantasy genre. Now, I've got to give this a tie between all the countries that make film, because they've all done good stuff in their own right, And, do we consider Lord of the Rings a U.S. film or like a New Zealand film? Or is it a foreign film? Or, you know what I mean? So this is kind of a tough one because it might be written here, but it's filmed somewhere else, or, vice versa. And who knows where the original stories have come from. So fantasy is way up in the air. Some of the best fantasy films ever. Come on, Spanish. We've got, some of the best things that have come out of there. Some of the... the greatest kind of thing. So definitely look to Europe for that too. And we're going to get ready to go for our commercial break, but I've got action, adventure, epics, musicals, sci-fi, war, and western when we come back. And, so much more to come too. We're going to talk about the highest grossing films by genre ever, etc. So don't go away. You're going to want to stay tuned and listen to the rest of this episode with me. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
When your cable company keeps you on hold, you get angry. When you get angry, you go blow off steam. When you go blow off steam, accidents happen. When accidents happen, you get an eye patch. When you get an eye patch, people think you're tough. When people think you're tough, people want to see how tough. And when people want to see how tough, you wake up in a roadside ditch. Don't wake up in a roadside ditch. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV.
No one just hands you the title, most advanced technology in its class. It needs to be earned. Earned with smart beam headlamps. Earned with vented temperature control seats. Earned with an 8.4-inch touchscreen. And if you're driving one, you know what it means to earn something.
Euphoria, Calvin Klein.
HTLA Radio 1.
Okay, we're back, and you are listening to another kickin' episode of Real Talk with Kate Taylor on HTLA Radio 1 New York. All right, where were we? We're just going to finish up with some of my opinion of who puts out the best in which genre. And we finished up with fantasy before the break, and I said that was kind of a tie between all the countries because, every country's put out some pretty good stuff in that regard. So I would say don't be afraid to watch a fantasy film from any country. Now we're going to be at the action-adventure category, and, of course, I've got to give it to us. The U.S. We're the home of the blockbuster. So, I've seen blockbusters from other countries, especially Europe, but we still have a corner on that market, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So we take the cake when it comes to action adventure. But again, don't be afraid to watch one from any country because you never know. Maybe that is what I like most about watching foreign film. It's always a surprise. Sometimes you get really pleasantly surprised. And, there's nothing greater than that. Okay, epic film. Now, we're going to, again, I know that we do the action-adventure and the blockbuster, but, Europe does the epic because it's an historical thing. They do it better than us. They've always done it better than us, hands down, because they have the history, and we don't. They know how to do it. So, since Henry VIII's first biopic to today, they do it better. And now, here's the thing, though. I have to tie this category with China. Because when you watch all of Jet Li's films about the unification of China, they're mind-blowing. They're literally mind-blowing. Not just effects-wise, not just visually, but obviously they're based on historic fact. So the characters are, there's always an arc there because it's real life and they arc in real life. And it's always tied up neatly and resolutely, but the actions there, the visual, the story, the music, everything. It's a complete and total package. Japan's made some good ones. I've not seen too many Korean epics. Pretty much I haven't. I've seen some really good Scandinavian. We just watched one called The Escape, and that's available on Netflix. And it's about, I guess, maybe the 13th century or 14th century I'm not sure if it was Norway or Denmark or Sweden or Switzerland, or one of those Scandinavian countries. But it was about, the nomadic cultures and, that they would travel and the families would be killed, and then the children would be taken by, the gang that killed the family as slaves or whatever it was, or, and in this case, the girl escapes. And but it's brilliantly made, brilliantly acted, sweeping visually. It's just really, really well done. So it's called The Escape. It's on Netflix. Check it out. Absolutely. And the actress is brilliant. And I thought she was so beautiful, even though she was really albino-like and had no makeup on. She was just visually stunning. So that's worth watching to me anyway. All right. So epics, Europe, China, and Scandinavia runs a third. Okay, musicals. Well, we've got to give this one to Bollywood. They are the only industry to make a musical horror film, and it works. It's called The Fog, and it's a serial killer slasher movie. She's in a beauty contest, and there's a jealous competitor, and it's brilliant. It's just brilliant, and it's a foreign film that's a horror film, and it's a musical, and oh my goodness, it works. So we make great musicals. I think Australia makes some good musicals too. I've seen a couple actually from them. But hands down, Bollywood with the musical, because they can make any genre of film and turn it into a musical, and it works. So you've got to give them kudos for that. So you just have to. Sci-fi has to go to the U.S. But surprisingly, I'm going to give a second runner-up here to Russia, because they've come out with some really good sci-fi stuff. Now, this is more of a fantasy kind of thing, but the Day Watch and the Night Watch films that were put out, I guess it's kind of a sci-fi, but it's more of a fantasy thing. That was brilliant, and I loved the effects, and I loved the story, and I loved the the history that they included in that. It was really, really good. So I think Night Watch is available on Netflix. Day Watch, I'm not sure. But you have to seek those out because it'll surprise you what the Russian industry does, because those are good. If you like that kind of film, it's really good. You have to check them out. War films. Oh, gosh. Well, at the risk of becoming, shot here. Well, actually, obviously, we take the cake because we've been involved in every war there is, so we've got something to say. But it's a tie between us and the UK and France, because I've seen, when it comes to depicting World War II, the French resistance is the core of it, and nobody does that better than the French. So, there you go. But, of course, we've made some absolutely brilliant, amazing things. And one of the things that sticks out to me, I know nobody's going to say this is a war picture, probably give it to the historical epic or whatever, but Shining Through with Melanie Griffith and Michael Douglas was probably one of the most wonderful films to come out of that, that World War II kind of genre thing. Speaking as a girl watching a war film, I can get into a war film with my husband and, get all patriotic for the soldiers and all that kind of stuff. But to have a romance be the core of the film, the backbone of the film, and then all the espionage and action around it, I thought was a really brilliant premise. And it kind of hooked me from the first moment. And it's visually sweeping, and it's really, really well made, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. And I just thought it was a wonderful film. It's one of those things I can watch over and over and over again, never get bored of. So, all right. So, yes, Europe and U.S. tied for war films. Now, Westerns. Well, I mean, obviously we are the creator of the Western film. We are the West. We're the Wild, Wild West, You've gotten some great mashups, though, just Django, with Quentin's Django Unchained. But Italy, the spaghetti Westerns, absolutely. You can't overlook those. And, but even just modern today, like Quentin did with the Asian kind of throw in and all those other mashups and stuff. And Renegade was a film with Vincent Cassel. And, that was a Western, but it had another genre side to it. It had kind of a sci-fi kind of supernatural thing going on with it, too. And Australian, The Proposition with Guy Pearce. That's a brilliant film. That's, I think they go and stake their claim on the land, and his brother's like a real, SOB. And the marshals come and tell him that if you don't kill him, we're going to kill you or your little brother or something like that. So he's forced to, kill his own brother. And it's a Western. It's brilliant, that kind of thing. So we take USA, takes the Western, definitely. But, again, there's been some other great countries that have done some good stuff, so don't be afraid to watch a Western from there, I guess I'm trying to think if there's any country I wouldn't watch a Western that was made from. Maybe Bollywood. I don't know. But, I don't know. A musical Western, possibly. I don't know. Because if anybody could do it, they could do it, right? All right. Now, here's something really interesting. What were the highest grossing films ever by genre? Well, I just so happen to have that information right here for you. Of course I do. Now, this is as of mid-2014, so these are completely current and relevant. All right. Now, genre type, 3D. Okay. The film was Avatar in 2009, and it grossed $760.5 million, and it's still holding the title for highest grossing 3D film. So, no shocker there, No shocker. Action film, martial arts. Now, this was kind of a shocker. Rush Hour 2, made in 2001, still holds the title. $226.2 million. So, yeah. Wow. All right. Action film, Heroine, The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, 2013. I haven't even seen that yet. $424.7 million. So, that's holding the title there for action film with the heroine. I wonder what it was before Hunger Games. I wonder if it was Terminator with Linda Hamilton. I'm curious to know. Okay. Adventure. Now, this is the King Kong with Adrian Brody and Jack Black and Naomi Watts. $218 million, 2005. That film is still holding it for adventure. That's really surprising to me. there's been so many more films that have come out, in that kind of way that was sweeping and adventurous and all that. That's really surprising. Animation film. Anime also. But it's Pokemon, the first movie, 1999, 85.7 million still holds that one. Okay. Now, highest grossing animation film CGI. That's Shrek 2 in 2004. Still holding the title at $441.2 million. Wow. Not even Shrek the Third, huh? Okay. Now, animation, motion capture category. The winner is The Polar Express, 2004, $183.4 million. So, yeah. This is really surprising to me. Stop motion animation. The highest grossing is still Chicken Run from 2000 at $106.8 million. They've made so many other ones since then, I thought. How can that still be holding the title? Okay. Christmas and or holiday film. Jim Carrey's Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas from 2000 is still up there with $260 million. Somebody needs to do a new holiday film. Now, this one is quite a surprise. I got to have my coffee, too. Coffee, cigarettes, they go with work, But comedy, 21 Jump Street from 2012 with Channing Tatum. $138.4 million. That is still sitting there for the highest grossing comedy film so far. What are you talking about? All right. Comedy horror. Ghostbusters is still the king from 1984. $238.6 million. Now, see, this is really surprising to me because all the Wayans brothers adaptations and, anthologies of all the films and all that stuff, they were brilliant. Hysterical, brilliant. I mean, I peed my pants more times than I could tell you. And really, still Ghostbusters is holding it from 84. I would have thought somebody would have taken it by now. There's been several comedy horror films out, for a while there. Since Shaun of the Dead, they became really kind of, that popular thing. But, all right. Comedy, R-rated comedy. Obviously, it's still going to belong to The Hangover of 2009. $277.3 million. So, yeah. All right. I'm not a comedy fan, so I'm going to leave it with you guys. Comedy religious. I didn't even know that was a category. But Bruce Almighty from 2003. $242.8 million. Interesting. One, there's a couple of films that are Jim Carrey films. Really interesting to note on here. I've got a whole bunch more coming at you, but I do have to take a commercial break in a minute again. Just the last one of the show. No? No commercial break? My producer's saying no. All right, I'll keep going until he tells me otherwise. Now, comedy. Romantic comedy. Still from 2002, My Big Fat Greek Wedding at $241.4 million. I loved that movie. And she made her debut as the director/writer, and she starred in it. She did the trifecta thing that, we all like to do. I don't act, so I guess that'll never happen for me. But all right. Comedy fantasy. Here's another shocker. Splash from 1984. $69.8 million is still holding that romantic fantasy comedy spot. Comedy science fiction. 1997, Men in Black, $250.7 million is sitting in the top spot. Ripped tried to take it, I guess. And there's been several other, sorry, but Click with Adam Sandler was funnier than that. I laughed my butt off, at that. So, and that was a sci-fi comedy, wasn't it? All right. Spoof comedy. Austin Powers and Goldmember, 2002. $213.3 million is still holding that spot. Sports comedy. Oh, here we go. The Waterboy, 1998. $161.5 million. Right. I like that. That was funny. I like all his films. I can't help it. They're funny. Comic book adaptation. Ooh. All right. Marvel's The Avengers from 2012. $623.4 million. And rising. I think it's still making money. So, wow. Ooh. Controversial and religious films. The Passion of the Christ, 2004, $370.8 million. Now, creature feature dinosaur. Jurassic Park, 93, $357 million. Crime gangster dirty cop film, The Departed with Leo DiCaprio, 2006, $132.4 million. Let's see. Disaster movie. Titanic still holding that spot from 97 with $658.7 million. Day After Tomorrow for disaster, global warming. And documentary political, Fahrenheit 9/11, Michael Moore, 2004, still holding the spot with $119.2 million. Yep. We've also got Magic Mike. You know that movie with Matt McConaughey and Channing Tatum again? 2012, $113.7 million. And let's see. Oh, The Birdcage with Robin Williams, 96, $124.1 million, is still holding the gay lesbian spot. Horror anthology, though, this is interesting to me. Twilight Zone, the movie from 1983, $29.5 million. And then found footage horror, Blair Witch Project. Horror remake, The Ring from 2002. I Am Legend is in the horror sci-fi spot. Horror slasher is still the Scream films. Torture is Saw 2. Horror zombie film is Resident Evil Afterlife. And mind-bending plot twister is Inception at $292.6 million. Actually, there's so much more. Go to AMC's website and you'll be able to see all of those there. Okay, now, unfortunately, we got to wrap up this episode, but I really had a lot of fun talking about genres. So, as I bring the lights up on another episode of Real Talk, I'd like to thank HTLA for giving me the opportunity to put my film school education in good use for you here each week. Thank you to our sponsors and all those involved in making the films I analyze here for you. Thank you to my crew and always my hubby, Christopher John Taylor. I would like to say a rest in peace to Sir Richard Attenborough. You will be missed. Your brilliance will be missed. Don't forget to go to the website to check out what's next, post in the forums, and to check out all of our original programming. Tune in next week as I dish for real about all things real. Good night, meats.
HTLA Radio 1.